Here, stories collide, untangling the truths that both bind and divide. From every creed, color, and age, we ask the question, what shapes each person from their very first stage? Join us. Let's uncover the why beyond the who. Walk in their shoes. See the world as they do. Welcome to the other side.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the other side. Over here, we try to dismantle societal biases and see the world from the lenses of people we otherwise would not have understood from our vantage point as individuals, formed by our biases and our personal lenses. And so we try to do this by initiating conversations with people from all divides, from all parts of the divides, from all cultures, from all generations, from all backgrounds, from all careers, to help you, our viewers, see things from the other side. On today's show, we have someone whom I have followed over the years, someone whom I have a great sense of respect for, and has been an inspiration to myself and many other people. Um, for context, she is a global HR executive and CHRO with over 30 years of expertise in HR strategy, board governance, and business leadership. She's a certified leader with CHRP, CHRL designations, advanced training from Queen's University and Rotman School of Management, and an IDEA certifications in equity, anti racism, accessibility, and ethical leadership. She's also an advocate for inclusion and equity through roles like vice chair of the HRPA's Appeals Regulatory Committee, a board director at Humber River Health, and a member of the Region of Appeals DEAR Committee. She's a mentor and advisor for Black Opportunity Fund, Black Mentorship Inc., and CABIP, driving systemic change in underrepresented communities. Lastly, she is an award winning trailblazer. You can't beat that, trust me. A top 25 DI Person of the Year 2021, top 100 HR Professional 2023, 2004 Women Changing the World America's Award winner, and co author of Flourish, a workbook for social innovators. That's a mouthful. Now, join me, make welcome Ingrid Wilson. Hi,
Thank,
Ingrid.
thank you. I love that summary. I need to use that one.
Okay,
I
I
love it.
can
Send it
I
to
can
me.
send it to you. Okay, that works. I'm so happy to have you on the show. Thank you for making out the time. I know it's cold. It's you want to rest after the busy week. It's a million things happening at once, but you still made out time to inspire and share. And for that, myself and every other person watching this video is indeed very grateful. Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me on.
Thank
I can tell you I'm happy to be inside because I actually went outside and ran in this cold and wind
you.
this
Okay.
morning with a friend.
Okay.
So this
Oh
is
my God.
excellent.
Oh, okay. That's great. It's a win for both parties then.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. Um, so we would quickly jump to the questions we have lined up for today, and we just want to see the world through your lenses, and not just perceiving how you see things, but most importantly, understanding you and what critical experiences, learnings that have formed who you are today. The reason behind these questions is because, like I said in the introduction to this video, lots of us judge, we paint people with just the same brush, right?
Hmm.
We observe things from the other side without truly understanding what formed the people we so misjudge. And it's critical that those walls are stripped down by seeing things through the lenses of persons on the other side. And so conversations like this are very, very important. And I know you've championed things like this before, so it's not new to you. And you'd understand how important it is, especially in multiracial communities where there's a lot of people interfacing, and when it's far removed from you, you don't really understand how important this is. But when you live in it, it makes sense that these things be addressed to help society become more cohesive and harmonious. So we'll go to the questions. First question: how would you choose to describe your cultural background in one word?
Uh, hard in one word. Proud Jamaican.
Okay, and why?
I think it's from the heritage of our parents, our families, and even now, even though we're separated across the world, there's a massive family chat where we all celebrate each other, we all value each other, and it's more than when you see the chant, "Hey, family, we appreciate you." It's because it's that Jamaican culture that we've supported each other through everything.
Okay, that's great. So there's a strong sense of family connection,
Yep, yep.
a deep sense of community, if I may say.
A deep sense of community, because I have to tell you, the family connections are have expanded. So it's not just the family members; it's our partners. It's um, diverse community from the LGBTQ plus communities. Everybody who stepped into our partnership space,
Mhm.
and when somebody joins the chat as a new family member, there's this joy of, oh, I've been let into the chat. I've been let into the family chat, right?
That's great. Do you think that that that's been formed by a bit of history? And I say that because, coming from where I come from, a lot of us bonded growing up. We grew up in the same spaces, probably had the same struggles, and those things have a power to unite. And because when you go out to the world, you don't find people with similar struggles who can relate to where you're from and see you for who you have been through those difficult and trying experiences, and sometimes joyful ones too.
I think it's it's embedded in this family, and mainly because we come from many one people. We are truly Jamaicans. You
Mhm.
know, my father is his last name was Wellington. We thought we were Scottish. We've now realized that we were Denmark, so we weren't really Dykes. We were Van Dykes, and there's probably a history that's followed us through that through slave days, right?
Yeah.
And my father also has Syrian mix, and on my mom's side, Jamaican Chinese. So we have a very diverse mix, very diverse cultures. We've added to the family from US side people that don't look like us. And we have unique discussions. I'm going to say in love. We can even talk about politics in love and agree to disagree. But it's a very respectful space. And when you join this family, we encompass you. I have family members who live in Czechoslovakia, all over the world, and they're on the chat, right?
It's, it's fantastic.
Yeah,
That's fan-
and I have to tell you, our parentage was always about respect for all cultures and communities, and something that I say all the time when people ask me about diversity. I tell you, I'm going to replace that word with humanity, because we're all humans, right?
that's the word. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, that makes
yeah,
a lot of sense.
yeah.
Okay. I'd switch to the next question. Um, what traditions or values from your upbringing have shaped who you are today?
I think it's the value that we can all step up, whether you're a man, woman, or otherwise, right? In our family, it was always a focus on striving to excellence, right? and doing it with the value of respect. I hear a lot of people talking about resilience, and I'm going to tell you after the last several years, resilience is a tough word for me to say because it's exhausting, right? But in our family, it's always how can you continue to move forward? How can you continue to help others thrive and strive? And coming from a space as a young person where we didn't understand why our mother and our grandfather, on my mom's side in particular, were taking us into communities after school to mentor and help people, was because they were embedding in us community and mentorship and volunteerism from we were young. So for us, my dad before he passed was like, how did all of you become activists? Well, we know why, right? Mom
Yep.
embedded her father embedded it. It was, if you don't step in, you're going to write about it. So we all write in one way or the other as well. So yeah.
Just to kind of put an emphasis on writing, because I find that lots of people kind of, turn their noses up when they hear about people writing about things. It's almost like it's a laid back approach, who's going to read it. But the truth is, beyond my perception, that is, writing is a responsibility to preserve history.
It
And once you,
really is. It is.
yes, it is. And once you put it that way, you can see the weight of the world on your shoulders, because you want to preserve, one, the truth; two, to inspire change; and three, to help those that come after you to learn, even
Yep.
those with you. So it's huge, and I'm honored to hear you say that, because I've been in spaces where people don't really understand how I write, and like, how much of an education do you need, or reorientation? But I am honored to hear that. So let's cut to the next question.
I just want to say though that writing
Yeah.
is about telling stories, about sharing that history.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Our mother was not even, she was a journalist, a writer, as well as spoken word, award winning spoken word speech artist, right? So
Okay.
writing from I was small, doing Shakespeare from I was small, was always part of our history. And quite frankly, we use writing almost as therapy. If you mash my toes, I'm going to write about it, right? I'm going to step
That
into
makes
that
sense.
space. If somebody does something to somebody else in our community, I'm going to write about it because it's therapeutic, but it's also sharing that story as well, right? So,
That's huge. That's huge. Okay, the next question is, what's a common stereotype? And this is a big one. You know all about stereotypes, and, well, how it affects people's perception in the environment, in the society. So what's a common stereotype about your culture that you wish people understood better?
um, that Jamaicans are lazy.
Hmm.
Um, you know, we come from a culture of very strong women, right? So if you strip out that culture, you're going after our women because it's our women that have brought us forward, that have brought the families forward. And often we are viewed based on something small that a group of men or one man has done in our community, which doesn't reflect that very strong sense of maternal care, um, how our culture moves forward, how strong our culture is. So it's often embedded in laziness and that, a lot of Jamaicans are criminals. Well, yeah, that's not true, right?
No. Yes,
So,
I agree. I've got lots of fantastic friends who are Jamaicans, and I think, well, now you say that, I personally am already having a bit of a moment, because when you say one of the perceptions or the common stereotype is that Jamaicans are lazy. On my, from my end, I see Jamaicans as strong willed,
mhm.
maybe it's the friends I've engaged with, the people who can set to do something and it gets done.
Yep.
There's no there's no stopping that wave, right? So I'm struggling already to think about why people will think that Jamaicans are lazy, and maybe that's because many people don't take the time to engage people. I'd rather say it's a function of media environment you find yourself in,
Mm-hmm.
the kind of people you engage with, the kind of spaces. And when you start to peel at that, that understanding, you start to see that it's a function of the individual that's making the perception and not the Jamaican being judged.
Exactly.
Because if you, so it's one of those cases where your bias plays a role in how you perceive other people, further complicating that bias.
Yeah,
And
we are movers, we are shakers, we have doctors at the highest levels. One of our relatives, first woman commercial pilot from Jamaica. Um,
wow,
so I think our history is not well known, and that's one of the issues, right? Because there's there's a lot of focus on education in Jamaica, right? And bringing it back home and helping the community. But you also find that Jamaicans are all over the world helping, right? So where we come from, how we make change and make difference is important, and we need to get past that stereotype of one small piece that you don't know about us, right?
I was going to ask, just thinking tangentially from what you just said, don't you think it's high time that the Jamaicans who truly represent Jamaica, come together and document the story of who you are? Because these misconceptions, have to kind of be dispelled.
Yep.
And you understand the importance of getting your message into certain spaces, even if people don't want to hear them. You just want your story to be heard. So you avoid the situation of what I call the innocent ignorance
Yep.
of the ignorant person.
Yep. Yeah,
And
we
I
should
think
do
maybe if
something
you
about that
in
because
spaces where you are, Mhm.
yep.
You're saying, go on.
Yeah, I was
It's
saying,
important. I think it's important. Hmm.
yeah. Yeah, I was saying that we need to do something about that because it's true. We haven't focused on highlighting all the historians and all the excellence. You see a lot of it come out this month, Black History Month, um, but we don't have that understanding that we're here longer than Black History Month. So why don't we talk more about that history through the years? Yeah, so that's an excellent idea. You should start that. Let's go.
Okay, I'll think about it. I'll take them down on my notes and then I'll do something about it. It's nice to think about though because the prospects are huge. You
Yep.
see, you'd find cases where people who have otherwise been silent never bothered to speak their truth or
Mm.
let the world know about who they are and where they're from, coming up to speak just because someone else has led the charge. And it's kind of like the saying, the rolling stone gathers no moss. but
Yep.
but in this case, it would, I think, it'll get bigger as it rolls down the hill because lots of people would be inspired to speak and not just challenge, but will I say redefine what the understanding is about the Jamaican culture and people.
Agree.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful thought line to go through. The next question is, what experiences have had the biggest impact in shaping your worldview?
I think it again comes from our parents. Um, my mother was a journalist. My grandfather was a very well known sports journalist who was killed in Jamaica years and years ago. But everything we approached was from a worldview. It was with the intent that anything we learned, education, and anything we talked about had a bigger space. right? And we understood that even though we were Jamaicans, our family had a broader impact. So I remember the president of a company once saying to me several years back, Ingrid, you are don't seem to be intimidated speaking to senior leaders. I said, well, I grew up with senior leaders, right? My parents were senior leaders in organizations. You know, my father was a very quiet man, but he was he was a GM for the our first radio station in Jamaica, right? An engineer. So they always taught us to respect people at every level, every space. So just because you carry a moniker of a senior leadership title doesn't mean that I'm not going to treat you as a person, right? So it was an interesting comment, but I kind of stopped and thought about it, and it's that view we've always had growing up that we can accomplish anything, anywhere.
So
Yeah,
in your case, it was the the totality of your upbringing made you adopt that worldview where look, I can fit in any space, my voice matters, and difficult conversations. If difficult conversations need to be had, they be had irrespective of the space or the people in the space.
yeah.
Does that
Those
encapsulate that?
yeah, those conversations, like we still have world debates around our family tables, Christmas, etc. It's like there's placements of where you're going to sit at the table because of who the historian and who is going to bring up the the debate battle. I mean, my mother, um, she read the news and produced news in Jamaica on TV for years. So she was talking about world news. We talked about it at home, right? So those debates, they still happen. And what's happening is the generation behind us is also sitting at the table, joining those debates, right?
It's a bit of passing the torch.
We're definitely passing the torch. Sometimes my husband says, "All right, I'm going to sit at the other side of the table for dinner because you all going to start the debates, and and I'm the quiet one, so I'm going to sit over here on the other
Okay.
side."
That's funny because I'd find that people who excuse themselves from those conversations eventually engage in the conversations the most when the heat gets turned up.
Yeah, yeah, and he does. But he says, I don't want to be in the fire that side of the table. I'm going to sit at the other side of the table. And
Okay.
you see partners all do that, right? Because
Mhm.
we will sit at the so dinner and food is a big part of it, but for us it's food for the soul. So
Right.
we will be sitting at those that table for many hours, still
Mm.
debating, and food is on the table, right? But it's a means of us all getting together, right?
That
So
makes a lot of sense.
yeah.
Makes a lot of sense. I'd take home the importance of inviting even people who are perceived not to have perceived, that's the key word, to have maybe grown old enough or valuable inputs to certain conversations to still sit at the table to have those conversations. And the reason I say that is it's just like trust. You don't, yes, you can say you earn trust in the process of delivering on that which you're being assessed or judged about. But in some other cases, trust just needs to be a show of trust, just needs to exist for people to step up to the table. And I say that because you mentioned having the younger ones sit at the table. And it's key because if you don't inspire the confidence, which comes from trust, they wouldn't, grow into feeling that they're welcome to any table, their voice counts, their opinions matter. And that's key to raising, I think, the next generation because if they do not have that backing from home, if you have homes where kids are constantly yelled at, a sense of self esteem, some people learn to bottle up what they think and feel, and the world loses one more spark. They could have made something great just because the foundations were a bit, not welcoming or trusting. So, But thank you for sharing that. That makes a whole lot of sense. The next question. Let's see. What challenges have you faced? That's a big one as well.
Mhm.
Because of where you come from.
I think one of the biggest challenges I've seen is when I came to Jamaica from Jamaica to Canada.
Okay.
And my dad at one point said there's no racism in Canada. What are you all talking about? Right? And because we're telling stories, and I even talked about it at an event this week. I'm a lighter skinned Black woman with good hair, right? And I say that not because it's something I go out there and say, but it is because women and peoples in my own community, Black peoples, tell me that all the time. And that one of the reasons you've been more successful in Canada is because you're lighter skinned Black woman with good hair. Right?
Okay.
And even on the platform I was moderating this week, I said, we as a community need to make space for everybody in our community. Right? We need to stop these stereotypes of first of all, every Black woman, every Black man is not the same. We all come from different cultures, right?
True. True.
So when you have people outside of our communities that don't look like us lumping us all together and making it difficult for us to face career challenges, and then you have a battle from it within your own communities, making it difficult to share space, it's a massive challenge.
It's a huge one. Yes.
Right? And I have big curly hair, as my husband calls it. All the girls in the family, we have big curly hair, right?
Okay.
But I tell you that story because years ago, I straightened my hair.
Okay.
Hairdresser said, "Let me just straighten it to cut it." And I walked into the office the next day, and a bunch of people walked past me. Is
Wow.
is that Ingrid? Is that Ingrid? And it spread all over the floor. National company across Canada. And
Oh,
the CEO showed up in my office with his cell phone, took a picture of me, and started sharing. Yeah, yeah,
God.
yeah. Doesn't Ingrid's hair look good? She should do this with her hair all the time. I'm going to tell you
Wow.
that was prior to 2019. I have never straightened my hair again. And I told him so. I love him because he's an individual who learns from biased behaviors,
Mhm.
right? And a massive supporter, right? But he waded in not understanding what he was doing.
Unconscious bias.
Yeah, yeah. And, but the openness to ask why I said to him, don't do that with anybody else, right? And I'm never straightening my hair again. And I present on platforms all the time. Sometimes he's in the audience and I talk about that story, and he will get up and tell people, yeah, that was me.
That's
I
a
love
strong
him.
character.
I love him, right? But he didn't understand. Um, and we forget the history of here for Black women and Black peoples, right? We forget where braiding hair and cane rowing came from in the days of enslavement, where we were hiding seeds, food in our hair, where we were mapping out roots with our hair, right? So that very strong sense of hair for us is very, very personal. And it's part of that challenge when you're in an environment where, a workplace environment where your hair, how you look, um, is I don't use the word microaggressions because it's really acts of exclusion. You're excluded because you are highlighted as being different. So the challenge of our time is that instead of us all in our cultures saying, you need to stop those behaviors and you need to stop treating us this way. We, in our cultures, make comments about you get better jobs, etc., because you're light skinned and you have good hair, right?
That's
Yeah. So the challenge exists because we in our cultures don't think there's not enough space for us, and the workplaces are not inclusive enough to make space for us as a whole. We're allowed in because we have something on our resume and some skill sets. But when we open our voices and step in with opinions, we're not we're not listened to. We're pushed aside. And it filters through our cultures saying, well, if they're going to treat Ingrid like that, I'm not going to step up and defend her because I'm afraid that I'm going to be treated the same way and then I'll be pushed out. So it's like we have this thread of this thread of I can't say it's bias because it's racism, right? It's this thread of racism by thinking that every culture needs to mesh in and fit in this box versus understanding there are different cultures, identities, groups, and communities, and this is how we can work best together for the
mm,
betterment of all, right?
that makes sense when you say it that way. It just had wheels spinning in my head just listening to you. The stories of, for example, you mentioned braids and how they were critical to uh, the culture. Uh, I'm black, but braiding had a different relevance to my people,
Yep.
and I'm sure they did have different relevance to your people. And so one person just seeing braids from a non-black, non-African, non-Jamaican perspective starts to make multiple or from ignorance is already even at a loss in terms of clarity. And even when you get to understand braids and hair from the perspective of one black person who's Jamaican, it still would not necessarily tell the whole story about braids to someone else who's equally black and has got braids. So it kind of highlights the importance of seeking knowledge on
Yep.
a unique basis before you throw out the opinions that you formed based on your innocent ignorance. I use that word so it doesn't look like we're on our part being biased as well and saying you're just totally ignorant. But sometimes it just comes from a place of innocence. Oh, I never meant any harm or hurt, but this is what I perceive based on where I stand. Help me understand better. And if you
Yep.
approach with that question, then maybe it helps further this conversation.
Yeah. And
Further this, yeah.
for the
Go on.
indigenous community,
Yes.
you know, many wear their hair long, many wear their hair
Yes.
braided, and their hair is important for them because when they were taken to residential schools, they cut off their hair. It was part of killing the Indian inside the individual, right? So hair is important to them as well for different reasons and different trauma, different cultural impact. So again, I love what you just said, Kingsley. It's about understanding the history and the impact culture because everybody's different, right? But if I walk down the hallway and somebody touches my hair multiple times, that's a problem. Like, I'm not touching your hair. Why are you touching my hair? Right? It's very, very personal, right? So, and every culture identity has different aspects to them, right? So, we need to understand that before we make those assumptions.
Very true. Very, very true. Must be challenging to have had those experiences even in the corporate space where people you'd expect to know don't know. And you've ended up turning those challenges to an opportunity of sorts because you've helped to helped other people going through similar circumstances to understand you're not alone and find your sense of identity, be grounded in who you are, and speak your truth. So I think that's important, and I'm sure anyone who watches this video is already grateful hearing you say that.
Thank
What
you.
what switch to You're welcome. Let's switch to the next question. Um, how do you think your background has influenced your aspirations and choices? And I'd add that this question is another very big one because you mentioned perceptions of Jamaicans being lazy. I mentioned perceptions of Jamaicans being hardworking. It's all over the place, and that's maybe from my own place of ignorance as well. But help us understand on your personal level, in your story, in your journey, how has your background influenced your aspirations and choices?
I think it would have to be a mother who used to pick us up from school, and I'm not going to say force us to volunteer, but she never gave us any choice. This is where we're going, right?
Right.
You show up at a school in your own school uniform. You're helping kids. But I also saw the responses to my mother when she went into the poorer areas of the city. Miss Carms, somebody saved you bread when bread was short. Somebody got you this, got you that kind of stuff. So they were feeding back to my mother and respecting what she was doing. And I'm going to say at that point, it was kind of, okay, this is annoying. I have my own homework. Why is mom making us go down here and that kind of stuff? But then as we got older, we moved to Canada and we moved into the spaces and people said, we need volunteers. We need people to put up their hands. It was second nature for us, right? Oh, it's like three of us here in Canada. Um, are even though our last names are no longer the same, people figure out eventually that we're in the same space because we're in the same space doing the same work. And I had somebody from one of my boards, and community ask, how is it that you all three of you show up and volunteer this way? And I said, you've been in our house as a youngster. This is how we grew up. We didn't understand how our mother and grandparents were influencing us. It's embedded in our DNA, right? So sometimes my challenge is not to put my hand up to volunteer for anything else because I need to also take care of my own space, otherwise I can't help
Yep.
others, right? And we have a tendency across the line. Craig and Wendy will also volunteer us and each other for things. It's like, oh, Ingrid, Craig, Wendy can do that, right? So we show up everywhere in the same spaces. My sister is more on the indigenous communities and accessibility, but we all
Oh, that's
have that
fantastic.
space. We all have that space of community.
Oh, that's nice. Now you mentioned the indigenous people. I'm trying to get someone from that end on the show because I feel they're somewhat one of the, we don't hear so much about them in the media. We don't, and when we do, it's from the voices of other people. I feel like it's important that they also get heard because I think their stories will be surprised. I just have one friend as a young guy, and we just spoke like a couple of words called together at the time, and he just told me a couple of things, and I started to see him differently. It was a lot of things got just by one conversation, and I believe when more people step up and speak, we would see the world differently.
Yeah, I've
Well, thank you for, yeah.
I've
Go on,
had the
please.
I've had the privilege of
Okay,
learning from a very good friend. She's Métis, and
okay. I'd love to speak to
her
her as well.
yeah, she would tell you that she cannot speak for all indigenous
Okay,
peoples because there are more than 600 nations, but I
yeah,
will I
true.
will connect you. But
Oh, I'd
you
be grateful.
I can tell you over the years with her, every year, every day, I learn something new. Um, and have also had that situation where I've made assumptions where she has corrected me, right? And I respect and value how she corrects me because she does it out of that willingness to share. So, yeah.
I would love to have them. I just fireworks in my head already. There's a lot of questions I feel we all need to. Yeah, that's true because, like I said, the bulk of the story has come from the lenses of other people.
Yep.
And if it is one thing I've learned, I like to get those conversations started from the source. So
Yep.
there's no adulteration, no agendas, no biases. It's just plain as it is, and we see the world from the other side.
Yep.
Okay, the next question. Um, what's a common misconception people have about your generation? Now, that's not Jamaican. It comes with age and the circumstances of the times when you were born.
Yeah. So I think I'm gonna equate it to running. I'm an
Okay.
endurance. I'm an endurance runner.
Hmm.
Um, at 61, I have a 50-kilometer trail race coming up in
Oh my
May,
God. Oh my God. I
and
feel very intimidated right now.
yeah, but there's a diverse group of us that run endurance distances from 5K to 50K and up in my age group, and the reaction to us is, but you're old. I'm going to add the older. How is it you're doing that? And even going out there this morning in minus 18 was, yeah, we're going anyways, right?
Wow.
We have to run, we have to
Wow.
train. So there, it just leads to this misconception that if you're older, you shouldn't do certain things, right?
Yes. Ageism
And
is another conversation altogether.
yeah, you don't know how to use computers well because you're older
Right.
generation. That's not true. Like, I see it on both sides. My mother will tell you she wasn't good at computers, but we used to get emails from her all the time before she passed away, and we couldn't figure out how this woman who's not good at computers could write these emails and a writer. But what she figured out was how to get the grandkids.
Hmm.
She would write down her notes and she'd get the grandkids to type up her emails and send them. Right. So if there's a will, there's a
There's a
way.
way.
Right.
I, It's fantastic you say that. I
Yeah.
like it that too because I come from a very strong musical background. I used to be a musical director somewhere sometime in the past. I play a couple of instruments, and many people walk up to me every now and then and say, "How do you? I never knew you could play this instrument." And I say something that hits them differently. I'm like, "The language is the same. It's
Mm,
just a technique."
I love that.
And so if I have to play piano, I hammer with my fingers. If I play guitar, I pluck with my fingers, but it's the same hand, just the technique is different. And I bringing it back to the conversation about your mother, was it? The send emails. I think she was already an adept communicator
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
before emails did exist. And so what just changed was the technique.
Yeah.
Click here, type this and that. And if she found a way around the technique to get the same results, then what basis does anyone have to judge?
Yeah.
So I think that's basically it. It's one of those, I would say, people would judge others from their own, I'd say, ignorance, but more importantly, as a statement I came across some days back, says when you listen carefully, you learn to see each confession as a judgment, or each
Yeah.
judgment as a confession, something like that. And so people are kind of telling you what they struggle with just by telling you what you cannot do. It's almost as though they're seeing themselves in you, and these things have a way of playing out in
Ye-
conversations and opinions like that.
I agree. And I come from me personally. If you tell me I can't do it, I'm going to do it. Yeah. I
That's
am
okay.
definitely going to at least weigh in and try doing it, right? Even if I have to crawl across the finish line. Here we go. Right?
Which contributed to my earlier comment. I said Jamaicans are not lazy people;
No.
they are resilient, and this is from the people I've met. I wouldn't want to mention names because some of them don't want to be mentioned just without their notice. But there are lots of people I've met, and you're like, even in smaller spaces, those who cook, those who in construction, those who are in accounting, mention them, and they have this tenacity you cannot find anywhere. How it's
Mm.
applied is down to the individual,
I
but
love
the
that word
tenacity.
tenacity. Yeah. I like that word better than resilience. I like the word
Okay,
tenacity
then that's
because,
it,
yeah, resilience carries this sense of exhaustion, but tenacity
right?
is different. It's moving to action. It's very intentional, right? Yeah, yeah,
I totally agree with you.
yeah.
So, viewers, you ageism is a thing, and you just don't want to say with your mouth what your perceived weaknesses about yourself are, kind of twisted as a bit of an opinion about someone
Yeah,
else. It's
yeah,
something you want to guard against.
yeah, exactly.
Next question. Next question. Have you ever had an experience that changed how you see people from a different background? Now, the earlier one of the questions you had earlier was about people's misconceptions about you, and now this is about any possible misconceptions you've had about other people, and probably why.
I think, uh, you know, I'll take it from the sense of every time you join a new company, a new project, you're meeting new people. People will share opinions with you about, okay, this is how this person is, this is how this company is, expect to see the person do this, I've had this situation with the person. And over the years, I've tried not to do that, right? I want to form my own opinions when I walk into a space, right? When I get to meet people, I don't want to go in there with the assumptions that are coming from somebody else or another situation, right? And I'm a very fact based analytical person. So I usually start at the bottom to build trust and respect. So I'm going to come in with a clean slate, and you, during our interactions, need to show how you're going to react with me, because I have to tell you, you could be a friend outside of the workplace, but within the workplace, act very, very differently, right? So, I'm not saying that I don't carry the same biases as everybody else, but I try and squash them and have an understanding of learning and openness to learning. And I think it's from having a background as a mediator. You learn more and you hear more when you
Hmm.
listen
Okay.
more.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you think that stance, that ideology you have, was also formed from your experiences as coming from a culture that's somewhat, maybe most times, misunderstood? Because I think when you learn to be on the other side of these kinds of, misconceptions, you learn what it's like. So you tread carefully so you don't become what you criticize, if that makes sense.
I think I'm going to say tread carefully and strategically,
Hmm.
right? Because for me to thrive and be safe in many spaces, I I can't make those assumptions. I have to understand what's happening. For me, if I'm going to be working with groups and peoples, I that's why I do intake. That's why I meet with people, because what I'm trying to draw out is how intentional they're being about something, how we may work together, and a lot of my working together at this stage is volunteering. So is this really the space for me to be in?
Right.
So I probably do it more now that I'm older.
Yeah.
Um,
Experience.
yeah, experience, but younger, I probably waded in more, but still with a sense of caution, because a lot of spaces were not made for us, right?
Right.
For me, in the insurance industry, first Black chief human resources officer. Um, and that in almost 30 years, that is still the same.
Wow. Nothing's changed since.
No, and it shouldn't be that way.
Wow. That's new. How do you cope? When you mention strategically, it makes sense now because you know, almost, I don't want to say you've walked on the shells in some instances, but you've had to be very, very thoughtful about how you managed certain situations and people, just because the circumstances already positioned them to perceive you a certain way. And so
Yep,
you had to kind of work double as hard to make sure, you know, you had your bases covered. You just didn't put yourself in any kind of space or situation that allowed people to judge you or
yep,
confirm their biases, if that made
yep.
sense.
And I'm gonna say work triple hard, but I also um had great CEOs, not from my community, who circled me. They they were more than allies, they were sponsors. They would speak about me in rooms that I wasn't in, that helped move me through levels. And I remember one in particular would, he would approach me about, hey, I'm going to give you this project. I said, well, I don't know how to do this. Well, we're going to learn together, would be his response. Right. So he was not backing down. It was, here's an opportunity, you know, how we worked together through the years, and we're still friends. So I was lucky with these two individuals.
And that's very rare because I find in the corporate spaces a lot of result orientation and people try to climb to get as high up as they can. They forget to look downwards to kind of, and I don't mean downwards from a place of, you know, class or something like that. I mean, like maybe look behind and try to pull the people who kind of connect to you along. Mentorship is something that it's very not so often spoken about in the corporate space, but the importance cannot be overestimated. I have had
Yep.
experiences
Yep.
myself, and I'm sure lots of people in the corporate spaces here have had the same concern. So, if you're a leader out there, whilst it's important you keep looking ahead, you want to look behind and make sure that the people behind connect, you know, relate, believe in you, and you know, inspire them. You want to inspire them to kind of go through with you so that when you're out, you can look back and say, the system continues because I created, you know, I helped people to find their ways and continue the work where I left off. Okay,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
fantastic. Oh, you want to say something? You want to add something?
Yeah, because you made a point that you have to work twice as hard, and that's still required, because these two CEOs would not have noticed me if I wasn't working harder than everybody else to get into that space, right? So that's
Yeah.
still important. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And that's not even speaking about all the sacrifices that made all that hard work possible. But that's a conversation totally different, because I understand you're someone who's very connected to family, but then having to devote much time and effort to work meant something else had to kind of take a
Yeah.
bit of the pressure.
Yep.
And the question about how you manage that with women being very critical in black environments and black families, it's a lot of hats to wear and too many important priorities to kind of deal
Yep.
with. So I salute your courage because to even dare was, to me, it's a pass mark already, and then to achieve, it's I don't know how, I've run out of superlatives already. Already, it's just I can't speak so much about that. I'm trying
Thank
to
you.
manage time. I know you're welcome. I know we kind of, you know, eclipsed the time we set out, so I'm just trying to run through all the questions. But
Yep.
feel free to kind of, you know, share as much as you wish. Just try and manage as we go. And the
Yep.
next
Yep.
question, you've already mentioned, you've already explained this. I think there's no point asking what role family did play. But if you want to explain more, I'd be happy to listen. We want to know more.
I think it's what I said previously, like the
Hmm.
importance of family is key, and that is very evident in our family to the point that my nephew is an RCMP officer in Saskatchewan, and when he comes home for the family dinners, he brings friends with him. Right? If he's
Wow.
coming to the table, he's bringing friends, and they sit, they eat, and the debates start. And I always say, did he warn you about us? Because if you're at the table, you're going to be part of the debate. But it's that, and he always grins. It's that confidence that it's okay because this family's
Mm.
going to respectfully debate and move on. So yeah, so that it's more than just families. That the different generations, the babies, everybody's at the table, right? So
It's
yeah,
fantastic. It's
yeah,
fantastic. I'm sure a lot of people would have loved to grow up in such an environment where, and it's important because people have the opportunities to kind of share their opinions, test their biases in safe and accepting environments, and have questions or answers to questions they've concealed to themselves or don't feel that they can share in certain trusted spaces.
yeah.
It's I cannot overstate the importance of such an environment, and I'm glad you enjoyed such.
Yeah.
Many people would love to, though. Next question. Are there any family traditions you still hold on to? Now, you mentioned eating at the table a million times, but I'm
And the
sure there are
debate
more, and the debates and volunteering. Are there
and this
more that you still hold on to?
the big Sunday dinner. you
Okay.
know, yeah, you gotta even when you're busy, we still cook the big Sunday dinner, and again, food for the soul, right? Um,
Mm-hmm.
and we have a family, again, a mixed family, Filipino. She's Filipino, husband's Canadian, the kids, like through the pandemic COVID, we melded together even more, having family dinners once a month. And when you get invited to their house for a meal on Sunday, that's a family day to them. So if you're walking through that door on Sunday
Yep.
with half the food, they're telling you there's no girlfriends, there's nobody else. It's only family here today, right? So you have that extended family process going on still, and it's about food, right?
Oh,
So yeah, yeah,
and
food for the
for those
soul.
who, okay, for those who don't understand, maybe from my perspective, to put context to what you've said, in a very fast-paced Canada, with lots of things happening on the fly, you good food with trusted and connected people is a rarity. It's not something you find every evening. It's not something you find at the dinner table every evening or when you're grabbing a quick bite to head up to work. It's something that's rare across all cultures. This has nothing to do with being black.
Yep,
It's just a rarity, and I think that's played a huge part in what I call the Canadian coffee culture. People just want to grab something. They could grab it on the go. They could grab it anywhere, and the importance of sitting down and connecting with family is kind of you know relegated to the background. For someone to enjoy that every Sunday, I think it's something to look forward to. And secondly, because it's a family day, you'd find family meals. You have a stronger connection to even recipes that maybe have been passed down from generations, recipes that are not enjoyed anywhere else in Canada today, that are only unique to the culture and the background. So just stepping into that space, the scents, the wonderful smells alone can make your Sunday and maybe the rest of your weekend, something a lot of people in such a space would constantly look forward to. It'd be nice to be a fly on the wall in such a space where people just and just observe. It'd be wonderful. It'd be
yeah.
really wonderful. The next question: what's a lesson from your parents or grandparents that still guides you today?
I would have to say respect all peoples and the understanding that we're all human. You know,
Mm,
it was that you need to give everybody space, right? And no matter their background, their social level, where they come from, it's that ability to be able to talk to and communicate to everybody and
Mhm.
treat them respectfully, right? Yeah,
The keyword respect.
yeah.
That's great. Okay, the next question. That's about the culture. You mentioned about perceptions about Jamaicans being lazy and all that, but what do you? What's one thing this time you wish earlier was about what people misconceive. Now, what's one thing you wish they knew about your background and culture?
I think it's a word that you use, and that's tenacity, because we're a tenacious group of people, right? We will find a way to thrive and survive.
Irrespective of the circumstances.
Yep, yep.
Mm, strong. Okay, so I'm sure you guys heard Jamaicans are tenacious people. And if you have any misconceptions, then you want to look inwards first to find out why you have that misconception about Jamaicans. I know that for a fact. I've got wonderful, wonderful friends, and it's an endless list. Next question. In your opinion, what's the biggest barrier to understanding one another? And for context, in the Canadian space, you know.
I think it's the assumptions and not allowing the time and space to learn about each other. So we tend to walk in with preconceptions, which often carry barriers,
Hmm.
and then it prevents building true understanding. So we do that all the time. And it's that coffee culture, right? Because we don't have
Yep,
time. We're always racing. You're just going to make assumptions. Yeah.
and move on.
Yeah.
Oh, that's something, and I think the solution would be for people to slow down, or is it there should be a consciousness to kind of ask, even when it's fast paced. What do you think can help us?
It's it's hard because we live and work in the grind culture, right? It's how we've been conditioned. You know, when the kids go to daycare here in Canada, they get breaks at a certain time. You get a sleep break. You're in school. You get breaks at a certain time. And if somebody really really wants to go to the washroom, often they're told to wait because it's not break time. It's sleep time now. It's playtime. And then you get these situations where a parent gets a complaint, somebody, had an accident at school, that kind of stuff, and there's no understanding that what you're doing is building into that child's head and the identity that you can only do things at a certain amount of time because we have to leave space in the grind culture. When we're racing out in the mornings, we have to get our kids to school, or the fur babies have to be dropped off somewhere by 8 o'clock in the morning. You have this rush routine that you're dragging the kids out of the bed. You know, this morning when we were going for a run outside, my friend has two wonderful Ridgebacks, and they were kind enough to know that, hey, we're not going out with the ladies today because it's too cold, right? But normally it would have been, we're going to drag them out today, right? So we're trying to move them into our grind culture and our space, right? So, and it moves to that same question. People are always saying, talking about work life balance. And I always say, your work life balance is not the same as mine. We need to stop making an assumption that everybody's striving for work life balance, because my balance comes from running, right? If I don't run several times a week, we're all in big trouble, right? Because that's what clears my head. My husband will
Okay,
very, very clearly say, you need to go and run, right? So,
fantastic,
yeah.
fantastic. Maybe I should run a little more then,
Or walk.
because I'm sure I used to be well. I used to hold down my own back then, but a lot of my focus kind of I'm very creative, so I find my juices in the creative spaces, always
Yep.
making something, and call me a lab rat of sorts. I just want to see things happen, constantly experimenting. But
Yep.
it's nice to hear, that running does that for you at pencil that's somewhere on the fridge.
Yep. Yep.
Okay, okay, next question. How do you think that society influences the way we see people outside of our own circles?
I think it's still the same biases and conceptions that we bring to spaces with us. You know, I sit on the ACT Toronto board, so
Okay.
AIDS Toronto, and I don't come from that community. So when I got referred to that board, it was like, why are you even on
Why
this
are you
board if you
here?
don't come from that community? I said, but this is my family and friends. I have friends and family from this community. I've always supported this community. So if I'm here, I can support this community. And the other side of at Toronto is they have a women's group, right?
No.
For women that have either been impacted by AIDS or are vulnerable to AIDS because they've come in as immigrants, and that vulnerability still exists, right? So there's pieces that still speak to how I volunteer and what I do, right? And this is a community that I've always walked through or walked in and supported. But somebody actually was like, well, you're not from this community, so why are you here? Why do I have to be from the community to help the community, right? I can still use my voice as an ally. So I think that question came from that how society influences us, right? You should only go into spaces where you belong.
Well, I would add to that that while this question seems a very subtle question, it's quite loaded, and it was one of the chief inspirations for the show. When you were explaining your, your response or your thoughts about someone questioning why you were or are in the board, I was in my head. The only statement I could muster was to share and represent the opinions from the other side,
Yeah,
which is basically what this show's about,
yeah,
and it's about getting a rounded judgment and not just sticking to what you understand and know.
yeah,
That way, you are not having your biases rule whatever judgments you make from those kind of spaces. So,
exactly.
well, we've all been speaking about the same thing without coming together to speak about it, basically, because I feel conversations from the other side or about the other side have been long overdue in this space, whether corporate, whether just basic cultural, whether on the subway, in an Uber, in a classroom. I think that's wonderful. And one more thing I was going to add was, do you or ask, or do you think there's also a consciousness sometimes to influence, or in the way society influences our perception of people outside our circles? Because sometimes I've heard people mention, you know how cultures are represented in the news, especially when it comes to how they're described, maybe in cases of crime, like you mentioned, people saying Jamaicans are criminals and all that. Do you think that the news sometimes carry some of these biases, and conscious or unconscious? I'm not calling out any persons, obviously, but you hear the suspect was a black Jamaican, Nigerian, whatever the specifics, but then the next day there's someone else and some guy did this. There's no telling what background it does. Sometimes it's watered down when it comes to certain cultures, and for other cultures there's just this directness to paint you and damn you. And do you think that's a thing, or am I just making
No, I
assumptions?
it's part of it is media, what you hear and see
Hmm.
in the media. Definitely, there's definitely different ways to describe different cultures in the media or not describe, and even though they're not using those descriptors, that they're talking about the dominant group of peoples, right? But it's also part of our
Yep.
learned and lived culture. Biases come from our lived experiences and our cultures. So when we're growing up in our homes, right? Our children grew up with our family rules, our understanding, our culture, and then they go to school and that understanding starts shifting, right? And you see different behaviors, different learned experiences that they're bringing back home. And you hear like a Jamaican mother, or even any mother saying, this is not how you were brought up at home. Why? Because they're learning other experiences, other societal influences that they're learning, right? And it's because how our brains work. Our brains are bombarded by millions and millions of information, and can only absorb small portions. So what our brain goes to is, especially in times of crisis, or um, you're multitasking, going to school, you're getting ready for an exam, your brain goes back to assumption. Your brain goes back to lived experience, learned experience, right? There's a great book that I love by Malcolm Gladwell, a Jamaican,
Okay.
and he
Sh-
he
Can you
talks of
can you say that louder
he's
so people can
Jamaican.
hear?
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
I I didn't know he was Jamaican in the beginning, but I
Oh,
love his
wow.
book, and it's called Blink,
Okay.
right? And it talks about how we make biases and assumptions basically in the blink of an eye,
Oh,
right? By taking one small slither of the pie, one slice, we've made that assumption, right? So definitely society influences us. You know, my granddaughter a couple years ago, came into the house here and she said, Tata, my other grandfather, talks about this political piece and this person, and I don't agree with him. And she was 7,
wow.
right? So she's hearing these conversations, and she wants to have a conversation with us about, well, I don't think what Tata is saying is correct. She's part
Okay.
Croatian. She's part
Wow.
Croatian, so Tata. So so she's testing with us because she knows it's a safe space to ask that question, right? And we forget that our children and our grandchildren are listening, right?
Yep.
And
Yep.
when George Floyd was murdered, that child, I think she was 10 or 11, took her mother to the march. I'm going to march, right? My one of them, two of our sons were out there. I couldn't march. My husband is a cancer survivor, so the doctor was very clear we had to stay inside. And then all across
Mm.
the world, in Atlanta, all over, we were getting pictures of the kids. And when I say kids, under 30s, they're all
Hmm.
walking, they're all marching, they're all carrying what they've learned from us forward, right? And some of them, we wouldn't have expected them to go out there and march. And one of the things they said about it wasn't just that they were marching because of George Floyd, they were marching because of the societal impacts that they have been experiencing in their everyday lives that were causing them trauma. It was a massive learning experience and very proud experience. Look at these kids. They're listening to us, right? They
Yep. Yep.
knew that they could do that, right? So, yeah.
You
Yeah.
just needed the maybe time situation to get them to act, or I think it's one of those cases where these things have. I give myself as an example. Use myself as an example. When I was much younger, I was bad at math. I was very bad, but I did attend classes, and I was maybe the ideal student. Get to class in time, go home when it's done, and do your assignments. But I was bad at math, and sometime during my senior years in high school, it just clicked. It just clicked. And if you understand math very well, it's very, it builds on foundations. You don't wake up someday and know math without knowing the
Yeah.
foundations. And I, at some point, was very good at math. And I realized I understood the foundations. I just wasn't applying them. I wasn't applying them then, and I needed something, something to activate that awareness. And it was a teacher in this case. He just said, "You know this. We had a couple of sessions, and I went to school. It was on a holiday, so it was, I would say, friend, an older friend, and I'm over the shoulder. He just said some things to me, and I started to look inwards. I'm like, oh, you've got this really, and
Yeah.
the
Yep.
next time I saw a math question, I was like, oh, this is, and lots of people were surprised. So I think it's one of those cases where it's that threads relieve inside the next generation. It stays there as the embers relieve. It's glowing. It just needs something to just fan it to flame. It can be
I love
personal, it
the
can be circumstantial.
embers. Yep.
It just, yeah, it just comes up. So it just keeps glowing. It just keeps waiting. And the message for me is, even when it doesn't seem like those embers exist, just because you don't see the flame obviously burning, keep investing in those embers, because somehow, someday, there'll be reason for them to be fanned to flame. And when they do, you'll be glad that you made that happen.
Yep. I agree.
Next question. If you could have a conversation with any ancestor, anyone, who would it be and what would you ask them?
Maya Angelou.
I was waiting for that already. And
Yeah. People do not know about the trauma. She didn't talk for many, many, many years because of a trauma and an experience that she had. And
mm,
then when she did start to speak,
depth.
this creativity and how she wrote and explored, like I've seen some of her recorded speeches, etc. It's just massive, massive trauma for her to step past, and the courage to move past that and bring that change forward is spectacular. Nothing else but spectacular.
And what would
So
you ask her? What question would you ask?
I would probably ask her what made her decide to thrive and survive, and
Mm,
secondly, where does all that creativity come from, because she's very specific in some of the things that she talks about and the whys.
Mm-hmm.
and I love that she focuses on rising, right?
Right.
Right. So
That
even
makes
if
sense.
you cut me, you put me down, I still have the courage to rise. Always the
Mm-hmm.
courage to rise, right? And that is very important.
You think that the experiences she had to endure as well, you know, did two things. First, what I mean, they're not experiences every person would want to go through, but more importantly, they created, and I might be just playing on the edge here right now, they created an opportunity
They did.
for her, whether it was conscious or not, to explore certain depths of her soul, of her person, and perceive the world from a place of solitude. And that's why the quietest person in the room is usually the most powerful.
Yep.
Sometimes just being able to observe and internalize and draw connections that no other person sees, maybe because of the coffee culture and the fast-paced life. You just it's many philosophers. I speak a lot about philosophy because it's one passion of mine as well. Many philosophers across the world in different cultures have spoken about the power of silence and stillness, and it, they didn't have to speak about what caused the silence or the stillness. They were just united in the power of silence. Bruce Lee's daughter will talk about there's a book, Be Water, My Friend.
Yep.
That's basically, it still kind of connects to that. Whatever happens, adapt, but you don't have to do so loudly. Just
Yep.
get it done. So I kind of understand, and it's powerful when you say it like that. But well,
Yeah.
thank you. It just
And I love the power of the pause.
hmm
It's so important as leaders to use that pause, to use the pause before you respond to something from a peer or somebody that reports to you. Before you make that assumption, go back and check, think about it and reflect. So the power of the pause is like it's huge, right? So yeah.
very, very huge, very, very huge. Thank you for sharing that. The next question, which is relative, any person will have an interpretation of success, but to you, because we want to see the world through your lenses, how do you define success? And more importantly, has that definition changed over the years?
Yeah, I think success when we were younger was um, having assets and the ability to, not second guess financial security, right? As you get
Mhm.
older, as for me personally, it's about family, friendship, the ability to have quiet spaces for me, because when I go out, um, into spaces to do focus groups, etc., it's always absorbing from others. Um, and seeing that shift in others is also a success for me, right? And then getting through to the end of the day without that soul sucking, oh, this organization or something has sucked my soul again today, right? It's that having that ability to like the space you're in and the peace that's around you. And that's part of why I run, right? So for me, that definition has definitely changed. A lot of it is success for me is having, done work really well, but then having that space where I can go and read a book, write. I do a lot of audible books, so very, very different shift for me.
Wow,
And
that's
family,
nice.
Sunday dinners.
Of course. Can I permit me to summarize that by saying, when you were much younger, from what you said, it was about the dreams society sold to you,
Exactly.
and that kind of caused you to look outwards. But as you got older, and sometimes, looking outwards sometimes means you ignore looking inside.
Yep.
And as you grew through the years, as you grew, you realized that there was more to this than what was initially sold to you. Maybe not by anybody, but the common conceptions around, you want to, like the Gen Zs will say, chase the bag.
Yep.
And I've never seen any bags on wheels or shoes before, but let's
Yep.
just say, as they say, chase the bag, get the career and all that. But you're saying, as you grew through the years, you realized the importance of, maybe I'd use the word balance, or more importantly, looking inwards and being at peace with yourself. Is
Yep.
that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's definitely it. What is my balance is important.
Mhm.
I mean, it's like when I have an event where I have to go out, it's like people laugh because they'll hear me say, "Oh, I got to come out of the sweatpants and the PJs and put on real clothes and shoes." But it's more than that, right? It's that comfortable space and protecting my space that I'm
Mhm.
that I'm in. So yeah, before it would have been, oh, yes, I'm getting dressed, I'm running down there. It's like, yeah, I have to be in the middle of that. So no, yeah, yeah.
As Master Po would say, no, Master Shifa would say in Kung Fu Panda, a popular animation
Oh
movie,
yes, yes, yes.
inner peace.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Inner peace.
You just want to hold on to that and have nothing kind of mess with that,
Yeah,
because it takes detailed work to create that. And
yeah,
sometimes you just don't want to let go. Okay, thank you for
exactly.
sharing. The next question is, what's a saying or proverb from your culture that you live by?
Uh, I love everything Maya Angelou,
Hmm.
but um, you know, some of our elders used to talk about, this person looks like they couldn't mash ants. And
Okay.
I definitely read into that because again, you can't make an assumption by just looking at somebody and assuming this is how they're going to behave or this is how you're going to be. So that's a big part of me with when I get into a new space, not listening to somebody else saying, well, this is how this person is, or that's how the person is, that's how the person
Hmm.
is, right? Because you have to learn for yourself. So, yes, so My grandmother used to, I used to, on my mom's side, used to talk about she looks like she couldn't mash ants, right? So, and translating is this person looks like they're meek and mild and they're not going to cause any problems, they're not going to disrupt. And some of those very quiet people are the biggest disruptors around here, right? So you can't assume, right? So yeah.
It's great you say that. Okay, next question, and that's the last one before we wrap it up. It's been a whirlwind of a conversation. Um, if you could pass down one lesson, and I know you're passionate, so I had to say that really passionately, to the next generation, if you could pass down one ember to connect to our previous question, the word repeat from our previous question, if you could pass down one lesson to the next generation, what would it be?
I would have to say that we are all human.
Hmm. And why would you say that? Because you would think that that's so obvious, right? We exist in the same space, we see ourselves. How can we suddenly now realize or not know that we're human? What do you think
Be-
is
because
the
the
cause?
society, school, society influences, and the generation behind us are, they they have this thirst for knowledge. They're always asking questions,
Mm.
but you want to be sure that when you're asking questions, what you're learning is still respectful and still coming from a place of understanding that we're all human, and we shouldn't fall, or they shouldn't fall into those social constructs that have created race and all the other societal issues and barriers around us, right? So I think it's important to start from that place of humanity and respect and let it weave through everything.
Wow. The more you look, is that the way to say it? The less you see.
Yeah.
I think we've come to a space where we should be more connected because we're together,
Yeah.
but then the divide even grows larger, and there's a need to consciously reach out from the other side
Yeah.
to constantly be in touch with what connects us all, which is humanity.
Yep.
Well, I would like to say, well, we've come to the end of this. I could go on and on. It's wonderful having this kind. I just sit down and keep quiet and have you just speak for hours, and then you know someone wake me up when I'm 60 or something. I just listen, right? But I'm happy that you could find the time. I'm honored that you could find the time to sh- help us see the world through your lenses and contribute to this conversation about stripping down walls, stripping down something and walls. Like you associate walls with stuff you need to break down, but we just need to strip each layer at a time because it's a whole load of things that need to be talked about, and we can't just swing a hammer and the whole wall comes crumbling down. This has been built over years, so I thank you for contributing your voice to this conversation. I'm sure the viewers would want to know if you have some things you want to tell the viewers about what you do, or other conversations you're in, other spaces you want them to kind of connect with you and listen to you, or reach out to you for guidance or anything. Just would be
You
happy to
know,
hear from
everybody can find me on LinkedIn,
you. Okay.
but for me, it's about, I do a lot of human resources from the very people centric side. I have a new
Okay.
course loading up with Humber College in early May, um,
Okay.
which is a HR program. So it's a series for um, removing systemic barriers from people centric programs and practices, right? From the HR lens and for people lens. So
Okay.
something that kind of has been crafting for the last few years. But yeah, HR
Hmm.
is where I sit, HR and governance. So, but yeah, I'm always on LinkedIn. So happy to
Okay.
share and connect.
Okay. If with your permission, we could maybe add your LinkedIn profile or something to the
Oh,
descriptions or something.
yep, that'd be perfect. Yep.
Okay. And you mentioned you are into mentorship and what's it called? Advice and mentorship for young Black people. Are there any spaces, any Black persons watching this could also
Yep.
connect?
Black Mentorship Inc. for sure.
Okay. Okay.
Um, they do a lot of mentoring for youth and young professionals. So
Hmm.
if you go on their mentorship site, they're there. And quite frankly, a lot of my mentees actually they reach out through LinkedIn,
Okay. Okay.
and you know, I with time I can definitely help where I can. I had the honor of meeting some of my mentees in person for the first time this week at an event. But usually, yeah, just reach out.
And with that, today's wonderful episode has come to an end here on the other side. A heartfelt appreciation go out to our guest, Ingrid Wilson. You see, Ingrid, we deeply appreciate the insights and wisdom you brought to today's conversation. Thank you so much. Thank you. To our viewers and subscribers, your support, engagement, and encouragement mean the world to us. And trust me, this journey would not mean the same without you. We deeply appreciate you. If you have any thoughts, ideas, opportunities you'd love to share, please feel free to send them across. You can reach us via email on talkshow.theotherside@gmail.com. Your voice matters, trust me. And finally, before you go, do not forget to like, subscribe, share, and comment if you haven't done so already. And of course, hit that notification bell so you never miss an episode. For now, it's goodbye, but not for long. I'll see you guys next time, right here on the other side.